This week, we're discussing Nvidia vulnerabilities and some Nvidia export backdoor concerns, what certificate expiration means for secure boot, SonicWall vulnerabilities that have people turning off their VPNs, and the Shade BIOS. Stay tuned. Below the surface, coming up next. Welcome to Below the Surface. It's episode number 56, being recorded on Wednesday, August 6th, 2025. Welcome, Mr. Vlad Babkin. Vlad, welcome.
Hello.
And Mr. Chase Snyder. Chase, welcome.
Greetings.
I found other people that aren't attending besides Black Hat and DEF CON that we lovingly refer to as Hacker Summer Camp 2025. I was not able to attend this year, but am certainly excited about a lot of things that are already have already happened and are happening this week. So we'll talk about maybe some bonus things during the show, including Shade BIOS, which is super interesting. Just a quick announcement before we dig into it. Below the Surface listeners can learn more about Eclipsium by visiting eclipsium.com/go. There you'll find the ultimate guide to supply chain security, an on-demand webinar I presented called Unraveling Digital Supply Chain Threats and Risk, a paper on the relationship between ransomware and the supply chain, and a customer case study with DigitalOcean. If you're interested in seeing our product in action, you can sign up for a demo, all that and more, at eclipsium.com/go. Very excited. We've got a new product announcement version coming up. I won't give any specifics on the show, but that is imminent at this point. Lots of really cool stuff in there. So a demo is probably a good thing if you're interested in what we do here at Eclipsium. It ends up in our product, and that's probably the last time I'll talk about our product on this particular episode because I don't want it to seem like a product pitch. But I can't help it. I'm excited. I work here, and it's a big release, right? So let's talk about Nvidia first up. Nvidia Triton, which is an open source framework for interfacing with Nvidia hardware to do AI workloads. Did I get that right?
Yep, you are.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Reasonable at a very high level, I'm sure.
Server. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good enough.
And so I thought that Wiz found this vulnerability, or Wiz was posting about it, or was that a different vulnerability? Was that the Container Toolkit vulnerability?
That was
Am I getting those two?
Container Toolkit one.
It was.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
Nvidia Escape, which was in their Container Toolkit, and this is in the Triton Inference Engine. But that goes to show that the Nvidia vulnerability landscape, no shade on Nvidia, but the more that they become sort of foundational to the AI infrastructure, the more of this kind of thing is going to be discovered and also be newsworthy.
Yeah, it's super interesting because Nvidia makes a lot of hardware and software, right, to support AI workloads in various capacities. And I'm still trying to learn like what hardware and software and hardware they have. And why people use it, right? That's what I get hung up on. I'm like, okay, but what does it do? Why do people use it? And therefore, perhaps I can answer the question of why do people care if there's some kind of vulnerability or backdoor or something, related to cybersecurity going on with it. So it's a widely deployed, actively maintained, powers machine learning inference at scale across countless organizations. Is kind of what the article said from Trail of Bits, who also, this article was written by a new hire. So like, good for you. I think if Will is the new hire, who yes, it is. It's Will. Great job, Will. Like, awesome way to make a splash in your new position is to come up with a vulnerability that's so big that we're talking about it on our podcast, which is great. Chase,
yeah,
Vlad,
high risk vuln in widely deployed Nvidia stuff. Certainly a newsworthy event. And shout out SemGrep, one of
right.
I don't know, Vlad. I know you're a grep enthusiast. It's somewhat part of Semgrep. What do you feel about semgrep? The semantic
So
grep.
SemGrep is kind of similar idea to grep, but it's based on rules to detect different bad source code patterns. So he did some grepping around there and found interesting stuff as far as I understand. So in this case, if I think it was public C source code, I guess. So it seems to be
Yeah,
open
because
source stuff.
Triton, sorry, and we should have said that NVIDIA Triton is open source software,
Yeah.
hence having access to the source code to use SemGrep on it.
Yeah, and SemGrep has a whole bunch of public rules which can detect interesting stuff. So if you use it on the code base that didn't previously use SemGrep, you will find thousands of things it can find for different languages. The point is it has some level of false positives, so don't expect all of your findings to be true positives. But it tries to detect code smells, and in this case it actually succeeded. So, and it uses a whole bunch of rule-based detections for source code to find, well, this. So,
yeah, I mentioned in the Trail of Bits article that this writer's initial assessment was that the finding represented a theoretical vulnerability with limited practical impact. That's not exactly a false positive, but it's like he found something and sort of had to do a little further digging to discern whether it was meaningful or not, and then sort of ratcheted up the significance and the risk score of it by getting into the chunked transfer encoding, which
in
is
HTTP.
yeah.
It's interesting
and
how many vulnerabilities still kind of trace back to handling of the HTTP protocol in addition to the parameters that are passed along to the application via HTTP. Glad we talked about your discovery of the bypass authentication or command injection. The vulnerability we talked about, right, was also kind of manipulation of HTTP headers to bypass things. Of course, lots of other code bases have this similar kind of issues with this processing.
Yeah, the problem with HTTP is how incredibly complex it is for how simple it looks like. What can be simpler? Just send a verb, a pass, HTTP version, a bunch of headers, and the body, right? Well, not so simple. There is also chunk encoding. There is like all of the different upgrades to HTTP2 or to WebSockets. There is HTTPS handling and a lot of fun with that. There are special headers which can arrive for which you can send, which somehow alter processing of HTTP. There is also stuff like how proxies interpret these headers. So if you stack enough proxies, you might have a lot of fun vulnerabilities just based on proxies handling different order of headers differently. So there is like a lot of fun to be had with HTTP, and this is one of the places. So transfer encoding is usually a weak spot for a lot of parsers, and this one seems to be included. So in this case, like I honestly question the sanity of even trying to write your own HTTP parser, because it looks like they actually did write their own, at least if I'm correct.
For Triton.
So yeah, like I'm not sure if it is based on something open source. But my question would be, why would you write your own HTTP parser? Like, what do you gain?
Yeah.
I mean, especially in this case, like the most part of performance impact here is obviously inference. You aren't gonna win a lot from ultra fast parser. So
yeah, I'm not sure why they would do that either, right? Isn't there? So you're saying like Python and Go have libraries to handle HTTP, like Python requests, right? There's a tried and true library that everyone's using. Therefore, they're coding it hopefully to spec and without vulnerabilities, although vulnerabilities still arise, but they're much less than if you're going, oh, I'm basically gonna write my own Python, request or whatever, web server backend.
Yeah. In this case, they're writing in C++, but to the point, there is at the very least a boost HTTP server. At least that's comes to mind. Like there are probably other C++ libraries to handle this stuff. I mean, I can understand if why would do this in a high performance scenario where HTTP is the bottleneck.
Right.
Maybe I don't understand something here.
Yeah. No, it's a great point. It's always a delicate balance. Do we write something ourselves? Do we rely on open source and other libraries? And then how much of a mixture of the two that we have? It's interesting. It's, from a developer's perspective, it's a tricky waters to navigate. I was doing this with WordPress at one time, and I was very heavily involved with this third-party WordPress library that allowed me to access the WordPress API. And then I just constantly started having problems with it. The author wasn't updating it. And at this point, I was like, now I've gained so much knowledge about how this WordPress API works. I'm just going to write my own because this person abandoned the project. The other options for this particular technology at the time, in Python, were greatly limited. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to write it. I'm going to write it myself. Like I got to write this and maintain it myself. And I'm like, I don't need to implement the entire API because I'm not creating software, that allows other people to use the WordPress API. Like my application needs to interface with a few different endpoints in the WordPress API. So I'm going to implement those. I'm going to try and do that the best I can. And that's what I ended up doing. That's not always the right thing to do, right? If someone else was stepping up and providing a nice, secure, fast, reliable WordPress API, 100% I would have used that code, but that wasn't available. So
Oh, I might have to eat my words a little bit about the Wiz thing. It looks like Wiz. Oh no, it's different. Okay. Wiz did announce the NVIDIA Escape, the container toolkit thing, but they also disclosed a CVE in Triton, CVE 2025
okay.
23319, which is linked from the Trail of Bits post. That was about a vulnerability chain leading to AI server takeover. And I'm frantically scrolling to see what the overlap is. The two new ones from the Trail of Bits post are different CVE numbers, but it seems like they're kind of a similar.
Along a theme. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is very much due to the increased focus on AI technologies. So where, companies are developing all this new AI technology, software, hardware, and security folks are like, ooh, it's shiny. It's new. More people are using it. Maybe we should look at the security of it. And now the code is getting, under some scrutiny from security researchers. Hence
Yeah.
the vulnerability disclosures that we're seeing.
Yeah, this post says that this Trail of Bits person, Will Van Devanter, discovered these bugs during a routine onboarding practice at Trail of Bits, which I'm curious what the onboarding practice was where he was digging
Well,
into
a lot of times in security research or jobs of that nature, like you start your first day and they're like, here's some software, go find a vulnerability. Like, let's see how fast you can do it. Put the rubber to the road and have at it. And Will, in this scenario, great job, man. You hit a home run or grand slam even, right? In finding vulnerability. Good for you.
Yeah.
Love it. Love
He's
it.
got a plug in the end of the post for the for Trail of Bits' testing handbook. So maybe it was like, okay, take our testing handbook.
Testing handbook, go about the software and let us know what
Yeah.
you find something good. And he did. Beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, having a good handbook for companies that do pen testing is important.
Yeah.
So
No,
apparently their
100%.
handbook is indeed good.
Yeah. Nvidia was also in the news. It says the headline was it was a little dizzying to read, but I think I get the gist of it now. It says Nvidia is defiant over backdoors and kill switches in GPUs as US Mall's tracking requirement and calls them permanent flaws that are a gift to hackers. So what I read from this, like you read the headline and you're like, why is Nvidia like so eminent about putting backdoors in their firmware and GPUs? That's not the case at all. It's the opposite.
Yeah, they're saying they didn't put backdoors like all of the normal companies do, but
Right.
we all know the truth, right? So let's put it this way: like if you're pressured by a lawmaker to put stuff in your hardware that you produce, you will probably put this stuff in whatever you produce. So at the very least, we have seen it in many other cases.
No,
Like,
I agree, Vlad, but also there's I call it the question, what is the true intent behind the back door? And what was the intent behind like the code that we now labeled as a backdoor? And there's I think like three different scenarios that we've seen, right? There's the security is so poor that we confuse a backdoor for just really poor security. The second, slightly related scenario is developers needed some debug, some type of functionality. And in implementing this kind of debug or functionality for the application, they inadvertently introduced a backdoor, right? Or like it is a backdoor and they just forgot to remove it or didn't think it was a big deal to leave it inside, right? Joel's backdoor and D-Link routers is the classic example of I send a user agent with a specific string. I think it was Joel's backdoor, backwards, and it bypasses authentication, right? And then the third one is like a true backdoor, and maybe two different. Who depends on who put it there. It could be someone in the supply chain has poisoned something and put it in a malicious backdoor, and it could be the company intentionally put a backdoor for the reason of backdooring it to spy, to kill a product, turn it off if they're violating a license agreement, as an example. I'm not saying Nvidia did any of this. I'm just saying historically, when I've talked about this topic, that's all the things that come to mind for talking.
So like the closest historic comparison for me that comes to mind would be when US was doing export ciphers for TLS and for SSL, when like specifically NSA required SSL vendors to put special export ciphers for the open source version of OpenSSL, and those ciphers specifically were weak for NSA to be able to spy on everything. And what that resulted in was not what exactly we wanted. Like, sure, NSA got their wish to spy on those, but what happened is that everybody else also got to spy on all of the communications.
100%.
So technically, those were useless. And this is what Nvidia is poking at. Like, if you put some government feature to, oh, hey, government can control this, well, it's very hard to make something that only government can use and attackers cannot. So there will be like, this is a major point about this. And moreover, because it's GPU, it's not exactly connected to the internet directly. So even if you put such controls, let's say, okay, let's say government wins. Let's say Nvidia and puts controls into their GPUs to be able to kill switch them remotely. Well, China is just not going to connect them to the internet. So we ain't turning off Chinese data centers, but this makes all of the data centers weak if it is on all of the cards. Imagine someone actually managing to find how to trigger this backdoor on their own and just shutting down your data center permanently.
Right. Yeah, shut down the AI data center completely because I found, Nvidia's backdoor that lets them do that. But once I stumble across it, why can't me as an attacker, I also use that as well?
Yeah, so this backdoor might require some special keys, but still, that's a terrifying feature to have because I mean, we have seen a lot of code execution issues, even in like really good frameworks. Like, come on, we just discussed a potential code execution in NVIDIA Triton. Like, sure, researcher didn't find a way to exploit it, but that doesn't mean there is no pass. And CVSS score of 9.8 implies stuff, right? So maybe NVIDIA sees the pass. So,
do you think there's some kind of like geopolitical 3D chess going on? Like the people who are advocating for literal backdoors for export control purposes or whatever have to understand, and there's been countless examples over the years, that any sort of intentionally introduced backdoor is going to get weaponized against you in ways that you don't want, and yet they can still continue to advocate for those. Is there like another strategic layer to it where they're like, yeah, we know that it's going to be like, they think, but we'll get more benefit out of it than the bad guys? Or are they just kind of like, well, previous backdoors have all been weaponized against us, but surely this one won't.
Surely we already know how to craft it. This can be part of it, or history repeats itself. Like, people don't learn from history a lot of the times. So it's not just US or lawmakers. I have seen people make the same mistake multiple times in their life after being burned themselves on a mistake. And they just go ahead and repeat the exact same thing later. So it's not just that. And moreover, like, if you think about it, modern Windows desktops, they pretty much spy on you. They send a list of files to Microsoft for searching for pirated content, and telemetry at some point was collecting your keyboard inputs, I think. So it's de facto keylogger. So all of that existed at some point. I don't know what happened to all of those, by the way. They might still exist, for all I know.
Well, the most recent one is the
So
Windows recall thing where it was like, for AI
yeah.
purposes, we're going to capture a screenshot of your your
Mm-hmm.
screen
Mm-hmm.
every
Every
second,
5 minutes, yes.
whatever. And yeah, a lot
Let's
of people. There's a lot of backlash against that one.
yeah, and they say they rolled back. And by the way, I think they're still gonna introduce it. By the way, they just waited until backlash died down and then started to quietly push for it again.
Hmm.
Because like, yeah, the official reason is AI stuff, but unofficially, that's a screenshot of what you do every 5 minutes. So
Yeah,
that's like an incredible source of information for whomever wants to understand what you specifically were doing. So it's hard
Yeah,
to
I
deny
think,
the dual purpose here.
but I
yeah,
think China's concern in this particular case is with the H2O chips, which are specifically designed for the Chinese market, which the U.S. military just blessed and said, "Hey, Nvidia, you can now sell these chips to China, whereas there's a whole bunch of other ones that they cannot sell to China. So this one's like specifically designed for the Chinese market. And China's concern is if you've got a
Why?
production line just meant for China, you could easily backdoor that and sell us these chips and do all kinds of different things. And one thing that struck me from the article too was a proposed chip security act calling for embedded location verification requirements for export controlled AI accelerators. In this case, I think it would be the non H2O chips to present a location to go, hey, if you're calling back and you're in China, China shouldn't have these, and that's bad. Therefore, like they could, not saying that they're doing this, but they could enact a kill switch. Like you got a hold of export controlled hardware and you're in a country that we're not allowed to export that to. Therefore, we're just going to throw a kill switch your way and turn it off.
I mean, how do you do this on the GPU? Like, okay, you
Mm.
can put GPS tracker in there. You can spoof GPS, so that's a known thing.
Oh,
Or you can
100%.
actually, or you can put the chip in such a place where GPS cannot connect. And then, okay, if Chinese IP connects to the internet, well, sure, don't connect the system to the internet.
Right.
Like, I mean, at some point, like some of the AI research doesn't need to be air gapped. So it's not like it's a necessity anyway. Like if you're doing some super top AI research which you don't want to leak publicly, that's it. And even for AI inference, you can limit outgoing connections so that the server might not even know its own IP address. So it's just very hard to actually implement those restrictions.
Export controls. Yeah, export controls are hard to enforce because we're talking about hardware a little easier, but software is super hard, right? Because it's you can transfer it over the internet in a million different ways. So
Yup, and in this case, like the question is, not every place where you want to run this software necessarily has GPS, and moreover, you cannot force everybody to have some kind of GPS tracking because then the software is useless. And then
right,
what stops you from actually patching that part out? Like even if you roll this out, like sure you can try to obfuscate it, but then that puts a lot of pressure on open source software, way too much pressure for comfort.
right.
Like let's kill all open source AI efforts altogether, I guess. So it's not so simple. There is no easy answer here. And by the
Um,
way, I see Apple mentioned in the same point. I mean,
right.
yeah.
like
Apple
that's also terrifying.
yeah, constantly in that debate of, yeah, that I mean, privacy is like part of their message. So any of those kinds of requirements that would require, or they're in a constant debate, especially in the EU, about encryption and end-to-end encryption of chats and stuff. I think there's a new resurgence of that conversation of whether they have to backdoor WhatsApp and Apple Message
Yeah.
end-to-end encryption for EU
It,
specifically.
it gets even better. Like if you look at the laws for some countries, like for example, Ukraine, at one point I did read a bunch of laws, and what I think I found are provisions for de facto if the government comes to a mobile operator and tells them, "Oh, hey, we wanna intercept messages and calls for this person," operators are forced by law to provide technical means to do this. So a whole bunch of this is already in the laws itself. Like if you look at certain countries, I'm not sure about US laws specifically, but like countries like Ukraine have it already. I'm not even speaking about China, Russia, or like even more special services countries, so to speak.
Yeah.
I want to navigate into the UEFI waters because that's something that we know and we love and we focus on here at Eclipsium. And there's some really cool things that have been posted. I want to start with Matthew J. Garrett's blog post titled "Secure Boot Certificate Rollover is Real, but Probably Won't Hurt You." So
Yes.
the high level is Microsoft, like certificates can't live forever. They have to have, well, usually you configure a certificate to have an expiration date. You can configure them without an expiration date. But Microsoft has issued certificates that are part of the secure boot process that are expiring in October of 2026 is when the production PCA 2011 certificate expires. And there's a couple of other certificates. June, so the UEFI CA 2011 in June of 2026, and I believe that's a key exchange key, a KEC certificate, and that's the KEC certificate that is the third party CA1 that will sign third party software like Shim. Did I get that right? There is Microsoft's. It is a KEC certificate, and that I believe is the name, right?
Yeah.
So
I think we talked about that one previously when we were talking about Black Lotus
yes,
mitigations, because there is this concern about there's like a time, sort of a deadline on when you're supposed to roll out Black Lotus mitigation.
but here,
that relies on that.
so also
text.
Matthew J. Garrett, says if you grab a copy of Shim that's shipped in Fedora, it's not directly signed with the Microsoft UEFI CA 2011 certificate. Instead, it's signed with the Microsoft Windows UEFI driver publisher certificate that chains to the Microsoft UEFI CA 2011 certificate. So now we get into certificate chaining, which makes things wonderfully complex to talk about. He says it's not unusual. Intermediates are commonly used and rotated, but we look more closely. It was issued in 2023 and expires in 2024. Older versions of Shim were signed with older intermediates, and a large number of Linux systems are already booting certificates that had expired, yet things keep working. Matthew says that largely it's a timing thing. Like, is the certificate expired or is the system date and time wrong? Which is kind of interesting. But
so
he says that, and Vlad, I want this last part, and then I want your take on this because it says the upshot is that no one enforces this. There's reference code that disables the check for the expiration date of, I'm going to assume that's intermediate CAs are not getting the expiry dates checked, and therefore that's why everything's still working. Vlad, please.
So the problem with checking the expiration date is your computer does not have magic clock. We just sync with the universe and know the exact time and date.
Right.
Like this is point one. So bypassing this defense is very trivial. Just set the system clock to whatever date you want, right? So in this case, this is way too early in the boot process to actually be able to have a reliable date, like TLS certificates that you are used to. Then point two is that expiration date here is not exactly the perfect protection against malware. So this is why we have DBX. So if you sign malware, we want to revoke the signature immediately and not wait for a year to revoke it, obviously, right? So there is a problem, point two. And point three is the only reason to rotate the certificates is to make sure that we don't use the same key forever, because it can be brute forced. Like computers getting faster, and faster. And okay, let's say we decide to use a certificate for 30 more years. If you hear the news and read the news, quantum computers are coming in 10, 20 years? And quantum computers are gonna kill RSA, and I think they are gonna kill elliptic curves as well.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever certificate you use out of modern ones, all of them will be broken. So you have to rotate them just due to technical reasons. But expiration date there is a very murky thing to actually touch. Like, okay, let's say we decide to rotate them. Let's say after 2026, all of the computers are using the new certificate without the old one. Then what? What happens if you want to install some older hardware?
It needs a
and it doesn't
driver.
have it needs a driver which is just not signed. Well, what are you gonna do
Or
next?
no, it's a driver, but the driver signed with the older certificate.
Yeah.
This is my concern. I don't know how much reality this is. If it's enforcing an expiration date, and my display driver is signed by a certificate that has expired, I'm gonna
Yeah.
boot to a blank screen, right? Because when we say driver in this context, it's a Dixie driver in UEFI, right?
Yep.
There has to be some kind of driver that loads your display so you can see your BIOS screen and see your
Yep.
Linux kernel boot screen, like see
Yep.
all that early stage stuff.
Yep. So in this case, like forcing the expiry date here is unfeasible, but we need to rotate the certificate anyway. So what will end up happening is some path for people with older hardware to still use it. Like maybe at one point we will have an optional path to switch off the old stuff, right?
Right.
So imagine that there is like minimal drivers that you need to even boot into your UEFI. Then there are drivers for specific hardware which are signed with the new certificate.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
then there is
that would
an
make
option
sense.
to stop checking the old cert.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say that for next 2-3 years we are gonna use that this turned on by default, and in 2-3 more years we are gonna set it to turned off by default, right? So that like people with old hardware can just go ahead and turn it on. Sure,
Mhm.
not gonna be too complicated for them, but people with new hardware are not even gonna care. So
Right.
nobody is just gonna suddenly revoke all of those signatures. That's way too bad for a lot of reasons.
Well, what's
But we
going to
do need
happen
to
is,
rotate the keys.
but the potential here is people disable secure boot altogether. However,
Yeah.
if you're, I don't know if you guys do any gaming. I do not, but I happened to see that it was it Battlefield 6, I think was the game. And I in my feed, because I have searches for UEFI, various searches that I do when I check my news feeds, and all of a sudden I was seeing all these news articles about this new game called, or new version of the game called, I think it was Battlefield 6, and it was all mentions of UEFI and secure boot. And I'm like, why? That's because the game, in order to run, requires that secure boot be enabled.
Yeah.
I'm not certain how deep that check is, because there's certainly ways around that. Potentially, there's probably some forums that can tell you how to do it, right?
Oh yeah, lots of Reddit discussion of like Valorant is another multiplayer online shooter that requires secure boot and UEFI to be enabled, and there's so much instruction about how to bypass it.
Yeah.
In this case, like the reason for the games is that at one point somebody decided it would be great to put anti-cheat into the kernel, as a kernel driver and whatnot, because like and make it permanently turned on, which is like as concerning as we just discussed about Nvidia backdoor, because technically now you have a Valorant developer who has a kernel driver in your system which is constantly turned on and monitoring all of your actions. That's as friggin' concerning. So at that point I decided that I'm never gonna play any games which put kernel anti-cheats for this reason. And by the way, to shout out to all of the players of those games, rethink your life choices. Like the game, like I mean, right now it's not evil, but if the government comes to those games and says, "Give us ability to spy on the people," it's gonna be like that.
Yeah.
Like it's not gonna be hard to implement.
Do you know, Vlad, is that an early stage kernel driver? Like, does it load at the same stage that like your CrowdStrike loads, or does it load later like our driver?
I honestly didn't investigate that deeply.
Okay.
But
I'm trying to read up on it right now, but
yeah, in this case, they probably want to load as early as they theoretically can to pretty much
to
bypass
prevent
any
someone
cheats
from
being loaded.
Right, to prevent someone from circumventing it.
But
like the earlier you load the driver, the earlier I got to load my malicious code to get around the enforcement.
And the most wonderful part is that kernel anti-cheat is not even gonna save you, because there are ways for cheaters around it all.
Yeah.
Like, sure, there are instructions on how to bypass it online. Probably Valorant is not stupid and reads them and finds ways to counter that.
Yeah.
So, but what about all of the more private stuff which never gets bypassed, right? And again, who is stopping you from putting in a malicious PCI card, which is like with DMA attacks and whatnot, right?
Right.
So because you can access computer memory from a PCI device, newsflash, right? And if you put that PCI card, how exactly is Valorant gonna detect it? Like, sure, there can be some hardware blacklist.
is that DMA once the OS kernel is loaded, or is that an option ROM that's getting loaded in UEFI before the kernel loads, or maybe a mixture of both?
Good
Conceivably,
question.
both
Like,
techniques could work, right?
yeah, both techniques could work, but again, to the point, we just spoke about a camera. Like, oh, well, we're not speaking about it yet. I believe a bunch of researchers from
Saturday.
Eclipsium Saturday is gonna drop something very relevant to this exact topic.
Yes.
Like,
Yep. 100%.
let's say there's hardware that's legitimate, which can do a lot of very interesting stuff to your computer. Like, who
Right.
stops you from, say, making your mouse and a bunch of macros, right?
Or the hardware security device that Dell has inside of over 100 laptop models. I didn't add that link to the show notes, but now that we're on the topic, which is relevant to our discussion, they found that what was that called? Driver controller hub, I think was the name of it. And Cisco Talos researchers figured out there was vulnerabilities in the firmware in this basically daughter board that to me sounded like it was a TPM kind of almost like functionality, helped you store your keys and things like that. But they figured out the firmware had vulnerabilities, and they could bypass the signature validation of the firmware and embed their own firmware inside of that device that lives as a daughter board inside your laptop, which I thought was really awesome.
They heard you liked firmware. Yeah.
So we
Okay. So
right.
internet says Vanguard anti-cheat, which is the Valorant anti-cheat or the Riot Games anti-cheat, runs at ring 0. So
Okay.
not super confirmed by Riot,
Yeah.
but
Well, there's a question of like when do they? There was I learned about it during because I'm not the world's most foremost Windows expert, right? Linux is where
Yeah,
I focus my efforts,
yeah,
but I understand enough about Windows to know that the drivers that get loaded in the kernel, some get loaded earlier, and I forget what they call that. The CrowdStrike was one that gets loaded very early because CrowdStrike wants to detect malware as early as possible inside the kernel. Then there's drivers like our driver, for example, that gets loaded much later, that it wouldn't impact boot. Like the system's already booted, then that driver gets loaded, which gives us the capability to take a snapshot of the spy flash in certain regions of memory. So,
yeah. Is it okay? Maybe this is getting product here, but I'm curious. It seems ironic that our kernel or that our driver would load later, but that actually provides it more ability to have visibility into the earlier parts of the boot process where we're looking for threats and vulnerabilities, and less likelihood of being, causing a blue screen of death type of situation.
well, I think it's a trade-off, right? Like
Yeah.
where gives us the capability to do a couple things. It gets really nerdy, right? It takes a snapshot copy of the spy flash, right? So it's physical flash storage that contains your
your
UEFI,
bias.
NVRAM, the mapping. We've
Mhm.
talked about it on, there's a whole mapping of the spy flash. But if basically you can make an image of that, you need high level privileges inside of the kernel in order to access that. It gets like super technical beyond there. I'll spare listeners the detail. If you want details on that, we can go into them on a future show. Super interesting. Check out our blog. We do talk about that, right? So that's the taking a physical snapshot. Then we also access certain areas of memory, right? And I'm not. Is it? It's like an MMIO.
I
So
think it's
you're
called
using different
MMIO.
IO channels to then access memory, and we're taking snapshots of that memory.
Yep, we're taking both dump of the SPIs through what you just described, and we also look at the MMIO. So we
Mm-hmm.
are dumping both in the product, and we are just comparing them as well. So this is one of the things you can do. Like if those are different, that's something that's definitely not right.
Something's wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, in this case, like, yeah, they might even give you different results by default. Like some of the stuff might only be accessible through one of the two channels for
Yeah.
whatever reason. But yeah, that aside, like there are legitimate reasons why you would have a kernel driver, but in my opinion, anti-cheat is just not one of them.
Right.
Oh
And let
man.
me put it this way: Vanguard has to be based in some country. Like Valorant has to
Yeah.
be written, like they have to put headquarters somewhere on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And wherever they put it, that government now has a lot of control to actually force them to spy on players, like
I just
wherever
read
they are.
that Riot Games, which owns or makes Valorant, is owned by
Mhm.
Tencent, which is a Chinese multinational company, and now it
Yep,
also
yep.
Ties back to the earliest discussion of
Really?
So, guys, congratulations. All of the Valorant players out there, congrats. You have a Chinese spyware on your computer, which is legal.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well,
the
legal.
kernel level, yeah.
At kernel level, which bypasses your antivirus probably as well. So
it could, yeah, it could. But it's also signed by Secure Boot. So Secure Boot's
Yeah.
not flagging it as something malicious, it's flagging it as something legitimate because it's signed.
Yeah, just a disclaimer: we are not accusing Valorant or Riot Games of anything, just in case. But the
Pure
possibility here is
speculation.
very obvious.
Yeah,
it's pure speculation.
Yeah.
So that we don't want to defame anything, but it's a very questionable thing to have.
Yeah. So, but it's interesting though. I want to go back to Matthew's article for a moment. So we mentioned option ROMs, right? This is a very early stage driver that gets pulled off of like your network card, for example, to tell UEFI like, hey, here's like some driver code so that you can load and talk to this network card. And as UEFI is booting up, it'll go out to, I believe it goes out to peripherals. I'm not sure what the process is, right? But the peripheral goes, hey, I've got a driver for you. And UEFI goes, great. And then there's some debate as to, is it signed? Is it not signed? What's it signed with? And so what Matthew's saying in the article is if the same intermediate certificate is signing option ROMs, then and is also signing shim, that it's probably legacy wise going to work for quite some time. And I think that's the crux of his statement of, yes, this is something that's going to happen, but it probably won't impact you. Which, I mean, Secure Boot on Linux is a different beast altogether than Windows. There's a lot of shim is a whole different. We could talk about that for probably an hour or more. Just that.
Yeah.
But while we're on the topic, I did want to talk about Shade BIOS. So I went through, and I think we're working on publishing this to our social media. I went through all of the B-Sides Las Vegas, Black Hat, and DEF CON talks, and I pulled out like what's interesting to Paul, but then I also highlighted like what's most interesting to Eclipsium in terms of research that's being presented at these conferences. And perhaps the most interesting one and most concerning one for me is security researcher Kazuki Matsuo, who's a Japanese security researcher at the firm FFRI Security. Now, if that sounds familiar, you may have read Kazuki's paper that was published last year on SMM in malware. That paper, SMM Pack Obfuscation for SMM Modules with TPM Sealed Keys, is also authored by the presenter, was submitted on May 7th of 2024, and is very much research into SMM code execution, which deals largely with UEFI, right? And then if you go back to Black Hat last year, the Kazuki also presented the option ROM talk at Black Hat last year. If we just described what option ROMs are. Kazuki presented there's a video available and all that stuff on how to put malicious code in an option ROM to get code to run inside of UEFI at pretty early stages in the process. Now, I have not seen any attacks in the wild that are adopting this technique, but last year I was like, this is the most interesting research. When we talk about malware and evasion and persisting on the system and being stealthy, I was like, this is cool. But Kazuki's like, hold my beer. This year at Black Hat, he's like, I'm going to write malware that just purely lives in UEFI. And the gist of this research, and it's being presented like pretty much like right now as we're talking. So if you're at Black Hat, I hope you attended this talk. But the current research called Shade BIOS is when UEFI does things like exit boot services, it's supposed to remove memory regions that were used in the boot process. And this research looks like they're preserving some of these regions in order to run malware in those regions. Vlad Chase, did I get that? Did I get that right? Is that the basic high level of this research? It's hard because we don't have the full details yet.
So I don't think I dug into this research specifically, but it sounds really interesting. Let's put it this way: if you get malware to run this early on, a lot of antivirus software is just gonna die.
Yeah.
Like you cannot do anything with it.
Well, that's what the researchers claiming, is that this evades all EDR antivirus software, which I believe. I don't, and even just based on little conversations we had earlier in the show, I believe we're well positioned to detect this. And if you read the talk notes, Kazuki is going to present how to detect it using memory forensic techniques in a specific tool. I forget the name of the tool. But I've sent that already to our research and engineering teams, and I think we're already aware of this tool, right? That lets you look at the memory regions. I'm like, I think we're pretty well poised to detect this based, Vlad, on what you said, right? We're looking at what's on the spy flash. We're looking at certain regions of memory. If
Yep.
we need to look at other regions of memory, it's probably not, that hard of a change to go, in addition to this region, also look at this region, and to be able to detect this kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what he
We
says. The researcher says
we're
in
also
the article is
we are
I'm
also
deceiving the OS loader by changing the memory map. So basically saying like, by the way, keep running this memory region where the BIOS is located while the OS is running.
Right.
Yeah.
To run malware in that memory region. And if it's a protected memory region, even the operating system sometimes can't gain access to that. Is that true? Is that true? There are regions, right? The OS is like, I can't even see that.
Yep. Otherwise, we would have a lot of
Blue screen to
vulnerabilities as
death.
well from this.
Yeah.
Like blueprints of death, yes, but then there is also stuff that's private to BIOS, like BIOS password and BIOS settings.
Right.
If
Yeah,
OS
yeah.
can just write anything, OS will be able to reconfigure the BIOS.
You're right.
So
Completely. Now there are things you if it does present to the operating system that variables certainly are one thing that has access lists that determine, like, hey, you can update your DB and DBX lists, right? But to your point, Vlad, from the OS, you shouldn't be able to change your BIOS password. That would defeat the whole
even
purpose of it.
DB and DBX updates are no, you're not supposed to just be able to write them. You need to be able to call functions which update them, because which have certain protections built in. And then there is also stuff like, like our product also collects SPI and MMIO dumps. I'm not sure how well that will detect malware that's implanted inside SPI. So it might work. I'm not sure about the shadow BIOS, shade BIOS, whatever it's called, research in this
Shade
case.
BIOS, yeah.
And if he actually kills how they're presented to us. So can he present something else than what we see? So
well, yeah, it could be a cat and mouse game, certainly.
Yeah, so this is a cat and mouse game. Like our product might already be positioned to detect it, but yeah, advanced enough attacker can do a lot of interesting stuff with it.
So we just have to wait and see what comes out
Yep.
after that. Let me see if I bring up my summary.
There is also SonicWall where just to disable SSL VPN.
Yes.
Talk about history repeating itself.
Yeah, on Black Hat really quick. I liked turning camera surveillance on its axis camera vulnerabilities. Hunting Windows secure boot, remote attack surfaces sounded interesting. More kind of attacks against secure boot. Breaching CPU boundaries, goes to the machine check was another one, and leaking privileged memory from any Intel system using micro-architectural race conditions. Interesting. However, micro-architectural race conditions in attacks in that class, branch prediction, Spectre meltdown, haven't seen them at all being exploited in the wild. I cannot get anyone to confirm that in that class of vulnerabilities there's anything being exploited in the wild. Now that could change at any time. So interesting to still see research being done in those areas.
We might not be seeing those vulnerabilities being exploited in the wild.
Correct.
Like it's hard to target them, but it's definitely possible that somebody is exploiting them right now. You just don't know. Those attacks are incredibly stealthy. Like, how would you detect this? Like, let's say, imagine that there is a cloud provider which didn't patch meltdown yet. and somebody goes ahead and exploits meltdown on it. How would we know?
Right.
Unless attacker does something with the data that's obviously malicious, there is no way to know. Maybe the attacker is just gathering data and waiting for a good time to actually use it, or he's using it as a long-term spyware, which can stay undetected for years and years and years.
Right. Yeah, if your intention is to just spy and not do any kind of ransomware or extortion, unless someone's doing a forensic investigation and discovers the attacker's tools, we don't have evidence that anything was because they're just laying low.
As there is no evidence, and you cannot inspect every single virtual machine in the cloud.
There was a couple more DEF CON talks, or some DEF CON talks, firewalls. No, the ones I wanted to highlight quickly, infecting the boot to own kernel, bootkits, and rootkits development. The result of that talk will be a new GitHub repo, from what I understand, that will give examples of bootkits and rootkits. That just sounds awesome. Emulating embedded Linux devices at scale with light touch firmware rehosting. Also, anything that's doing emulation of firmware for research is super interesting to me. Another camera thing, of course. Mickey and Jesse's help Linux in my webcam. Talk will be happening on Saturday, I believe at 12 p.m. Vegas time. I think I even knew the location, but go look that one up. Definitely want to. We've got.
By the way, that's the talk I was mentioned.
Yeah, dude, I wish I could talk about it right now, but I can't. Because I have advanced access. I have early access to that research, which is kind of frightening.
Don't want to scoop them.
Yeah,
it's absolutely awesome. So go listen to the talk. I don't want to steal their thunder, but let's.
I know I'm biased.
Today's convo.
Yeah, I know I'm biased, but between their research and the Shade bios, to me, those are the two most interesting research talks that are happening at summer camp this year. I do is segue into our final article. There is a talk at DEF CON called Firewalls Under Fire, China's 5-year campaign to penetrate perimeter network defenses. That sounds interesting, especially as we transition now to SonicWall, that patched a remotely exploitable vulnerability in its products, and then subsequently warned its customers that there's another 0 day that they're seeing. I think it's Akira ransomware group specifically go after SonicWall firewalls with what they believe is yet another vulnerability for something that they haven't patched yet. So it's a 0 day exploit, 0 day vulnerability in SonicWall devices that's so bad. SonicWall has stated to its customers, if you're running a Sonic firewall, bless you, running a SonicWall firewall, turn off the VPN services on these devices.
What can I say?
But also good for them. Good for them for going look, we don't know what's going on, and we want you to be protected. We don't want you to be a victim of ransomware. So you do this now. How many product vendors are out there going, you know what? You should turn off features in our product until we figure this out. Not many vendors have that gumption, have that process and security of their customers in mind, right? Most people try and look. Quite honestly, most vendors try and brush it under the rug and be like, "Hey, this isn't a problem." SonicWall is like, "Nope, this is a problem."
Turn it off. Yeah. That's like in 2024 when CISA told all federal agencies to disconnect their Ivanti VPNs when there were the known, except the government saying to do it.
The government saying that, not Ivanti. Yeah, but still very similar. Bad. Sorry, go ahead.
So important point here is that for years and years and years now, SSL VPNs of basically every single vendor out there has been poked to death with vulnerabilities, including remote code execution, including authentication bypasses, and whatnot. It's like a roulette. Do you have the vendors that gets exploited next or not? Like last year, was it last year? I don't know. It was Avanti. Now it's SonicWall. Who is gonna be next? We don't know. It might be whoever. But the writing here is on the wall. You don't want to use SSL VPN at all. What's the advantage over using OpenVPN with just TLS certificates? If your only answer is ease of use for customers, it's not something to be risking full exposure of your internal network through a code execution vulnerability in the web interface yet again. Or yet another code execution exploit. Install some good OpenVPN and use that. Because those vendors underneath are using OpenVPN. or maybe WireGuard. They're not inventing a new protocol.
Right.
So setting up like your OpenVPN with certificates will take you a couple of hours for a smaller organization. Yeah, obviously managing certificates at large scale is harder, but at large scale you're not going to have an easy time managing those certificates anyways. So there is a very good argument to be said here that do you even want to have this SSL VPN anymore? It's
Right.
not just
Because it's
SonicWall.
I think the commonality in between all of these devices that are getting vulnerabilities being discovered, heavily used by attackers in the past few years, Vlad, as you said, is that they're number one, they're internet facing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
This makes it much easier attack path. Like it's already out there on the internet. I just gotta go find it. You can scan the IPv4 space in less than an hour with today's technology. So I can go find all these devices. In fact, I can go pre-populate a database with all these devices. And back to your other point, Vlad, where you're like, what's the next one going to be? If I'm already scanning the internet, I don't have to scan for them again. I can just go back into my database. So there's the internet accessibility. They're built on largely Linux-based technologies that contain a lot of vulnerable code. They're not always kept up to date, and their vulnerabilities. I mean, they're basically from a lot of them are very old vulnerability classes with very
Yep.
few platforms offering any kind of memory protection. I think they are some vendors are getting better at adding that. I think Avanti announced that they are starting to add that, right? Which is, I mean, right now kind of too late. But so these appliances are using very vulnerable software. I think is the commonality, right? Vulnerable, usually open source software, with some proprietary software in there as well. And then the third thing that I think makes these devices a target is our lack of visibility that we've talked about. I can't run an EDR agent on my Linux based, VPN appliance. I just can't. Vendors just want you to be like, look, this is a box, go plug it in. Don't look under the covers. There's no need to monitor it. And the tools out there for monitoring it from the vendors are one, vendor specific, and two, not comprehensive in any way, shape, form, or fashion from what I've gleaned and understood so far.
Yep. And better yet, they are still offering you same old OpenVPN. So if you pretty much close all of the ports besides OpenVPN port, you're getting the same exact level of security as you would get from an OpenVPN box.
Right.
You're not getting anything extra. Everything extra open is just extra attack surface for you. And if you look at the common factor in those vulnerabilities, they are usually in some way, shape, or form connected to the web interface.
Yeah.
So ban web interface entirely. Don't let people use it. And if this SSL VPN appliance cannot allow you to work without a web interface, like the user must log in through that web interface, I would raise a question of if you even need it.
Yeah.
Like, because that web interface is gonna give the user their certificate for the OpenVPN.
Because I
Again, in some
believe
web shape,
like
some shape or form.
enterprises are adopting these air quotes VPN solutions, right? I hesitate to use the word solution, but these VPN platforms, if you will, because of scale and manageability. If you've got an enterprise and you've got 100,000 users, you need a really beefy enterprise platform that's going to make it easy for you to deploy a VPN to 50,000, 100,000 users. And therefore, they're leaning on these enterprise vendors that are giving them that manageability and scalability. But at the sacrifice of security, because they're trying to mass produce and get the code out, and focusing probably more on usability than they are on security of the platform.
But in reality, if you have a PKI management platform and you're able to deliver CRL, like certificate revocation lists, which is not that hard, it's just a file, to a bunch of Linux boxes, so it's not a hard task, rsync, right?
No, I've seen implement.
Deploying a default OpenVPN box give your administrator a couple of weeks. They will be able to script the shit out of it. Sorry for strong language. So, and that's it. Press a button, new VPN box dropped. Everybody can log into it using certificates. If you want to kick a user out, I'll revoke the certificate and get CRL delivered to all of the VPN boxes already deployed.
Right.
Done.
I mean, there's also, Tailscale's cloud service is really awesome. It's what I use, but I don't know that you can and I have to talk to the Tailscale people about this because I think their product is amazing. I use it, but I'm on a very small scale, right? I've got less than 100 machines and I've got maybe 2 users, right? And that's it. Different scale, but it works phenomenally well for me. But if I
Yeah.
came to them and said, I've got 50 or 100,000 enterprise users and I'm going to use Tailscale, like I mean, the first concern is going to be it's a cloud hosted service, right? It's not
Yep.
something
Yep.
that I own. That's the first concern. And then what certifications
Yeah.
do they have
So
in security policies, practices, guidelines, compliance? Are they
yeah.
compliant with so that I can even buy that? Maybe compliance says I can't because Tailscale doesn't have the right certifications. Maybe they do. Maybe they do have customers that are using it and they're trying to make inroads to it. But we have to ask
So
Tailscale. It's an interesting question.
my question to all solutions like Tailscale, I'm not questioning if they're secure or not. Maybe they are, maybe they are not. I don't know. But underneath, Tailscale still is using maybe WireGuard
They are
and or
100%.
OpenVPN.
I think it's WireGuard
And
underneath the
the
covers. Yeah.
question is, you have WireGuard and OpenVPN providing your actual security, and then you have a whole bunch of cloud stuff
Yeah.
with dubious security, which we don't know if
Right.
they validated properly or not.
Right. That
Maybe
layer is
they did.
suspect.
I'm not coming. It's
Yeah.
still an extra thing that can be exploited, which is exposed to the internet.
Right.
That's the point. You don't want that. It is already exposed to the internet. That's extra surface which you don't want.
Mm.
So if you want to have a very good security, only ever expose VPN port. But that's not true for Tailscale because they have to somehow connect to that cloud.
Yeah. Yeah. You connect to the cloud.
So
Yeah. So the account security of connecting to the cloud has to be super high. I'd argue right now, my experience, and I haven't like done their pen test or anything, but my experience is they run a tight ship, and is probably for smaller businesses. I'll put this out: smaller businesses a lot more secure than dropping in any other kind of VPN appliance or enabling the VPN
yep,
in your firewall, right?
that's
Because
that's that's
that's going to
that's
get
probably
get
true.
owned in today's environment. Now, I'm not saying Tailscale
Yeah,
is any more or less secure, but if history is a track record,
yeah,
maybe Tailscale just hasn't come under be a target yet. Now I'm giving
yeah.
hackers ideas. Like, please don't,
This
because I use it. Like, please don't hack me. Please
this
don't.
scary part about Tailscale and other cloud solutions is okay. They have okay. Let's presume they have 100 companies using them. Let's presume.
Right.
And imagine that attackers looks at this. Wouldn't it be great if they broke their entire cloud and got access to all 100 of their customers all at
Mm-hmm.
once?
Yep.
Like, I mean, do you see the problem here? Like,
Yeah.
the
No,
more
there's a risk
companies
to it.
will,
Absolutely. Yep. I
and
agree 100%. It's something I'm worried about too, Vlad, right? Like
this
I
is
am. Yep.
this is my beef with cloud password managers as well.
Yeah.
Like, just
Yeah.
like imagine one password getting broken into. That would be a
But here's
nightmare.
the challenge that enterprises face today is, am I better off security wise rolling it myself, rolling my sleeves up and doing something, or am I better off letting another provider do that particular solution for my company because they can do a better job at providing security? Like, I could spin up my own cloud or I could use Amazon. Who's going to do a better job of security? Now, there's risks in both of those things, and I think to navigate the waters as an enterprise, where I give a lot of credit to those
Yeah.
who are doing cybersecurity in large enterprises today, is when you're faced with that decision, what do you do, right? How do you justify that? How do you go to your managers and your board and go, look, I want resources and time because this is important enough, we need to do this ourselves and protect the security of it. And then these other things, I think we should outsource some of our security, some of
Yep.
that responsibility.
Yep.
Right. And that's not an easy decision to make.
That's not an easy decision. Like, maybe some of it is still puzzling me. Like, for example, my point about SSL VPNs. But if we, okay, let's say this is a cliff that we will have to jump off eventually. Like, large enterprises will have to solve this because, like,
Yeah.
they can keep getting owned, or they can at some point decide to actually stop getting owned, right?
Yeah.
So if they
Well,
decide to
I mean,
stop getting
yeah.
owned, that would be the first investment for me because that's the most obvious place.
But
But
it's a valid point, right? If I'm going to my manager going like, look,
Yep.
we're getting owned left and right, and other organizations getting owned left and right because we're using these public facing SSL VPNs from, these large enterprise providers. Why don't we do it a better way and
Yep.
own the security of our VPN infrastructure
Yep.
ourselves? Yes, more work,
Yep.
more maintenance, but at least we can control it and monitor it and
Yep.
configure it more
Yep.
securely, and not
And
just
it
as a
and it
box that I plug in my network.
and it massively will kill a whole bunch of attack surface, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, which is a very important point. But
Yep.
that aside, if you go into other security decisions, that's not so simple anymore.
No.
Like making
Agreed.
your own data center is not easy. Like, yeah, it will probably more secure depending on what you will be doing, but it's your whole data center. That's a huge investment.
Mm.
And question
This
is
is
just how much return over interest are you gonna have?
Yeah. Ongoing discussion about the AI infrastructure thing. Companies are both tapping
Yes,
into
same
the
decision.
neo
Yeah.
cloud
Mm-hmm.
providers, and I'm sure there's discussion like, is it more secure for us to build this versus to buy it from them? But then the whole shared security model comes into place, and it's like, you might think, oh, the AI data center is going to do a better job securing it, but they only cover part of it, and you got to know what they commit to securing and what is still your responsibility to secure, even if you're using their services. And that's a
Yep.
whole other domain of expertise that
Yeah.
not everybody
100%.
has.
Yeah.
Well, we're a little over on time. Sorry, I just want to thank Vlad and Chase for coming in this episode of Below the Surface. Amazing discussion as always, guys. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.